Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin. The mountain does not speak in words, but the clouds know what it has said. Long before the sun rises, when the sky is still unsure of its own light, a hush lingers over the ridges and valleys. The peaks sit like patient old guardians, their jagged silhouettes soft against the early blue. And just above them, the clouds begin to form, slow, ghostly curls of mist drawn up from the warming soil, the sleeping rocks, the hidden rivers beneath. The clouds you see are not born from nowhere. They are memory made visible. They are breath lifted, vapour gathered. They rise not as strangers, but as children of the land. When sunlight touches stone, something ancient stirs. The warmth seeps into the cracks and crevices of cliffs and spires, nudging the tiniest beads of water loose. These droplets, once buried in frost or deep within mossy veins, begin to rise, not alone, never alone, but with one another, like a slow dance of soft escape. They evaporate, become invisible, and drift into air that already carries stories from yesterday's fog, last week's thunder, a storm that kissed another peak far away. Science calls it evapotranspiration, the great quiet lift of water from soil and leaf, from bark and skin. Trees give off their quiet sighs, lakes shimmer their way skyward, and even rock, which seems so still, releases what it once drank. Everything rises bit by bit. By mid-morning, the sky above a mountain begins to swirl with what it knows. Wisps build, drift, collide. Air cools as it climbs. And then, condensation. The hidden becomes visible, mist becomes cloud, and cloud becomes a memory carried on wind. This is where the poetry and the physics meet. Clouds are not just moisture. They are shapeshifters made from countless tiny droplets, each one less than 1/100th of a millimetre wide. Yet together they catch light, bend colour, and cradle shadow. They drift across valleys like thoughts across a sleeping mind. But mountains shape more than just what lifts. They bend wind itself. As air moves across the surface of Earth, it doesn't move freely. It must rise over hills, push through canyons, and curl around summits. When moist air climbs the windward side of a mountain, it cools rapidly. Cooler air can't hold as much water, so the vapour condenses. Rain falls, snow dusts the ridges, and the air, now dry, continues down the leeward slope, often leaving the other side parched. This is the rain shadow, a place shaped not by storm but by silence, a space where clouds have emptied themselves. So when you see a cloud clinging to the side of a mountain, curling around its shoulder or hanging gently in its lap, you are watching the mountain breathe. Not with lungs, but with height. Not with air, but with the quiet conversation between temperature and time. There's a kind of memory in this cycle. Not memory like a photograph, but memory like a rhythm. A pattern traced again and again until the land and the sky become familiar with one another. The same places call to the same clouds. The same winds return to their turns. And the stone, though it never moves, becomes the reason the sky changes. Even the shape of a mountain matters. A sharp peak carves air differently than a rounded dome. Ridges funnel gusts, valleys cradle stillness. These topographies script the choreography of clouds. They sculpt the sky without ever leaving the ground. And the clouds, in return, remember. They gather again and again above the same cliffs. They form lenticular shapes, smooth layered discs like stacks of porcelain saucers, when the air flows just right over a summit. These clouds do not drift, they hover, fixed in place by invisible waves of rising and falling air. To watch one is to see the mountain's echo written in water and light. At night, when the wind quiets and the stars peer down with gentle indifference, the clouds sometimes vanish. But even then, the mountain holds what remains. It cools, it settles, it waits, and the next day it will lift its breath once more. Some say the earth forgets, but perhaps it only remembers differently. In cycles, in patterns, in clouds. So when you next see mist creeping up a forested slope or a cotton-soft crown perched on a distant summit, remember That is the sky listening. That is water returning home. That is the breath of a mountain, held, just for a moment, in the open hands of the air. Let's drift deeper now, into the layers beneath the mist, where the breath of the mountain becomes part of a larger, older conversation. Imagine water, that simple shape of 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, moving not in drops or rivers, but in vapour so small it slips between particles of dust and sunlight. This water once rested in ice, it once threaded through the roots of an alpine flower, it once clung to the fur of a snow fox curled in the shelter of a wind-slick stone. Now it floats in the moist, invisible, seeking, and in its search it climbs. Climbing air is not like climbing stairs, it is carried by pressure, guided by heat, and shaped by Earth's slow spin. As warm air rises, it lifts moisture with it, and as it ascends the flank of a mountain, it meets the high, cold heart of the sky. Here, temperatures drop with every metre gained, about 1 degree Celsius for every 100 metres. That change is enough to coax vapour into cloud, cloud into rain, and rain back into memory. The trees on the slope feel this first. They listen with their needles and leaves, drinking mist like a morning tea. The soil swells, mosses thicken, streams trickle softly from hidden springs. All of it, a slow conversation between falling and rising, between what was sky and what becomes earth again. Some clouds never rain. They travel like old wanderers, pulled across continents by jet streams high above, slipping between nations unnoticed. Others pour themselves out in sudden downpours, as if some invisible weight has tipped them too far. Still others linger, resting heavy in the folds of a valley, turning light into pearl and distance into haze. There are clouds that carry salt from the sea, clouds born above jungles, clouds stirred by cities, but the ones that form near mountains carry the texture of height. They are shaped by terrain, etched by wind, softened by altitude, and though they float far above, they are never far from the land that made them. This is what scientists call orographic lifting, a graceful phrase for the way air moves upward when it meets a mountain, and the cloud in response becomes a record of that journey. It contains the memory of the climb, it shows where pressure changed, where air became too thin to hold its weight. It leaves behind traces, snowfall on the summit, dew on a fern, ice locked inside a glacier. Over time, this cycle carves stories into the mountain's body. Rain becomes runoff, runoff becomes river, river cuts stone, valleys deepen, cliffs split, and still the clouds return, lifting again, whispering again, falling again. Over centuries this becomes the mountain's breathing, slow, patient, eternal, high above the tree line. Where the air thins and birds grow fewer, the clouds gather more quietly. They do not rush, they do not shout. Instead, they roll gently along ridgelines, shifting like silk through sky. On still days, lenticular clouds appear, lens-shaped wonders that look not like vapour, but like vessels hovering with intention. These clouds stay fixed, even while the wind races past them. They are sculpted by invisible waves in the air, created when wind flows smoothly over a mountain, lifting, dipping, lifting again. The cloud remains where the air rises, a standing wave in the sky. To see one is to see the shape of the mountain, not in rock, but in rhythm. These clouds are the shadow of stone cast in water and wind, and though they dissolve, though they leave no mark, they carry the fingerprint of the peak. Below, in the hidden folds of the landscape, fog begins to nestle. Unlike cloud which floats above, fog rests close, sinking into valleys like sleep into tired bones. It is the same in substance, only different in position. But it too is born of breath, the cooling of moist air, the hush after heat, the quiet that falls when night returns. Animals move differently in fog. So do sounds. Everything softens, trees become silhouettes, paths vanish. The world turns inward, wrapped in cloud that has come down to rest, and the mountain, which seemed so vast under sunlight, now feels close, as if it has stooped low to whisper to those who live at its feet. The people who live in mountain villages know these clouds by name. They watch the sky not with instruments but with memory. A roll of mist across a certain pass means 2 days of rain. A band of clouds stuck on a low slope means snow is near. They speak of the sky like a familiar animal, wild but knowable, mysterious but not distant. Science watches this too. Satellites trace the movement of vapour. Weather stations track pressure and wind. Models predict where rain might fall, how storms might grow. But even the most complex maps cannot quite capture what a shepherd feels when the fog rolls down from a cliff at dusk. There is something beyond measure in that, something ancient and tender. In some cultures, clouds are believed to be the breath of the earth. In others, they are ancestors, carriers of messages, gentle watchers. And while science may not name spirits in vapour, it does speak of memory, not the kind that thinks, but the kind that repeats, that returns. The water in a single cloud may have fallen as snow 1,000 years ago. It may have been locked in ice for centuries, only to melt in the blink of a spring thaw. It may have circled the globe, lifted by warmth, dropped by cold, joined and parted again and again. Every drop carries a history. Every vapour trail is a path traced in invisible ink. The mountain, meanwhile, remembers by standing, by enduring, by lifting the air just enough to bring the sky close. In that meeting, tone and wind, vapour and cliff, something quiet and beautiful forms. And when the sun begins to set, the clouds change again. They take colour from the light, pink, amber, lavender. They stretch long across the peaks, like blankets being drawn. And then, one by one, they thin and vanish, letting the stars return. But even in their leaving, they have shaped the day. They have softened the sun, watered the roots, reached the wind's direction, and they will return always, as long as the mountain stands. This is how the sky remembers, through clouds, through breath, through the soft echo of height. Now the night settles gently upon the mountain, and the clouds, weary from their slow ascent, begin to thin into darkness. But the story does not end when the mist fades. In fact, this is where memory deepens, not in the clouds alone, but in everything they've touched. You can almost feel the mountain breathing slower now. The last warmth of the sun retreats from its stones. Crickets begin their careful songs. Somewhere in a crevice, water drips from a mossy edge, a gift from the day's condensation. And above it all, the sky grows vast and dark and filled with the quiet glow of stars, like ancient sparks frozen in their watching. Even when we cannot see the clouds, they leave traces, a slick sheen on the bark of a pine tree, a puddle pooling in the curve of a rock, tiny beads of moisture gathered on the edge of a leaf trembling with the weight of air. These are the fingerprints of vapour, the quiet reminders of a journey from land to sky and back again. The water that falls from the clouds does not forget the climb it took to return. Some of it rushes down the slope joining brooks and streams, leaping from ledge to ledge in joy. Some of it sinks deep into the earth, becoming the slow hidden lifeblood of forests, and some remains, caught in a crevice, frozen into ice or gathered by roots to be lifted again, in time, to sky. It is a circle without end. What scientists call the hydrological cycle, and what the mountain knows as its breath. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation, collection. Over and over, with the rhythm of seasons and the heartbeat of sun and shadow. When you look at a mountain long enough, you begin to sense this slow breathing. You begin to notice how each cloud seems drawn not at random but with care, as though the shape of the mountain sketches its presence into the air. The trees know this rhythm, the animals know. Even the lichen gripping bare rock feels the gift of passing clouds. Every droplet matters. Every breath of mist carries nourishment, memory, movement. There are places in the world where clouds gather more often than not. Ancient cloud forests, perched on the shoulders of mountains in places like Costa Rica, the Congo, and the eastern Himalayas. Here the mist never truly leaves. It lingers all day, clinging to leaves and limbs, weaving between trunks, softening light until it feels like walking inside a dream. In these forests, evolution has leaned toward water. Trees drink from the air. Frogs lay eggs in droplets caught between leaves. Orchids bloom in shadows made of cloud. Even without rain, these places thrive. The clouds alone are enough, but take away the clouds and the balance breaks. As climate changes and air warms, the clouds climb higher, retreating from the lower slopes, leaving behind drought, silence, loss. The mountain's breath becomes more shallow. The rhythm stutters, and the memories held in stone begin to dry. Yet still, there is hope in each returning mist. There is hope in the knowledge that mountains and clouds are not separate, but parts of one great exchange, land shaping air, air feeding land. That what we do on the lowlands can echo into the highest skies, that protecting a forest might also protect a cloud, and that somewhere, just out of sight, a droplet lifted from the ocean is on its way to become snow on a mountaintop, to sleep there quietly for 1,000 years before it begins again. Some scientists study these cycles not just to understand weather, but to understand time, because water moves slowly, sometimes imperceptibly. A glacier flows like a river made of stone carrying the weight of centuries. A cloud, in contrast, is fleeting, here then gone, but together they teach us that memory is not always about holding. Sometimes it is about passing through. We too are shaped by clouds. Our moods shift with their shadows. Our crops grow beneath their gifts. Our ancestors read them as omens. We paint them in poems, chase them in childhood, and fall asleep watching them stretch across evening skies. They are part of our internal weather, a mirror for the way we drift, change, return. So when you next see a mountain wrapped in mist, or watch a single wisp curl around a snowy peak, pause. Let yourself wonder. That cloud may carry salt from a forgotten sea, or the breath of a redwood, or the melted ice of a vanished glacier. It may be on its way to fall upon your roof or rise again tomorrow in the mouth of a canyon far away. The mountain will still be there, waiting, lifting, breathing, and the clouds will return as they always do, not because they are commanded, but because the mountain remembers, and the sky in its silent grace responds. In that conversation, slow, patient, and eternal, you will find the soft truth that everything rises and everything returns. Rain does not fall blindly. It moves with memory, with shape, with purpose. When it leaves the clouds, it carries the trace of everything it has touched before: the ocean, the river, the leaf, the skin of a mountain. And as it falls again, it does not simply land, it returns. In the beginning, the rain forms from vapour, suspended in air, so thin it almost forgets it was ever water. But as droplets gather, they become heavy with remembrance. The atmosphere thickens, the wind hums, temperature shifts, and gravity offers its gentle pull. Then, one by one, the droplets descend. Somewhere below, the mountain waits. Its surface is not smooth, but full of texture. Cracks, ridges, folds of stone shaped by centuries of wind and ice. The rain remembers these contours. It remembers where to gather and where to flow. It seeks out the smallest channels, the old paths carved by 1,000 rains before. Even in places where the land has changed, where time has fractured stone and shifted soil, water finds a way to echo its previous journey. This is not magic, but physics. Water, ever obedient to gravity, always seeks the path of least resistance. Yet those paths are not random. They are sculpted by history, by ancient erosion, by the slope of land, by the presence of roots or moss or memory itself. The first droplets strike rock like soft drums, tapping rhythms into granite. They scatter and slide, some soaking into thin soil, others joining, merging, forming tiny rivulets that begin to move as one. What was many becomes one, and what was one begins to search. Downward, always downward. The mountain does not resist this movement. It was made for it. In fact, much of what a mountain becomes, so its gullies, its cliffs, its hidden springs, is shaped by water. Over years, over centuries, the rain slowly sculpts the stone, not with force, but with patience, with repetition. Scientists call this weathering, the slow breaking down of rock by wind, water, ice, and time. But it is not a destruction, it is a remembering, because as the mountain breaks, it reveals layers of stone, patterns of sediment, the frozen history of oceans long vanished, forests long buried. Each new crack tells an older story, and some stones resist. Granite, ancient and stubborn, holds firm against the rain, but even it yields eventually. Raindrops, though light, carry power in their number. A single storm may deliver millions of droplets to a single hillside, and over years, they wear even the hardest surface into something new. The rain also brings gifts, minerals, seeds, tiny fragments of life. As it moves across the mountain, it gathers what the stone offers: bits of iron, calcium, the salt of ancient seas, and carries them downwards, feeding the soil, the streams, the roots waiting below. Every drop is a courier, delivering the mountain to the valley. And there, in the hollows where the rain slows, something remarkable happens. Puddles form, pools collect, not deep, not loud, but still. In those moments the rain becomes reflection. Sky and stone meet on the surface of water. A cloud's shadow, a pine tree's edge, the silhouette of the summit itself, all resting, held for a breath, before the next drop sends ripples outward. This quiet dance between sky and rock continues even after the rain stops. The ground, now heavy with water, begins to release it slowly. Springs bubble forth, streams awaken, and the water begins its next journey, through forest, through root, through memory. Along the way it traces paths shaped by eons. Canyon walls, their colours layered like time itself, speak of floods and droughts, of old rivers now gone. Smooth stones at the bottom of a stream carry the polish of countless years, each curve a signature of flow. And deep beneath the surface aquifers swell, their invisible veins pulsing with the legacy of rain long past. In this way, rain does not simply shape the land, it becomes part of it. There is something tender in this, that water, soft and formless, can wear down stone, that something so yielding can shape something so unyielding, that time paired with patience can carve beauty from even the hardest surface. Ancient cultures noticed this long before modern science. They built altars to rain, sang songs for it, carved symbols into stone to honour its return. Because they understood, rain was not just nourishment, it was transformation. It brought both life and change. It fed crops, yes, but it also moved mountains, one drop at a time. Even today we trace the roots of rivers that began as rain on faraway peaks. Cities rise along these paths, forests thrive in their shadow. Every floodplain, every canyon, every fertile valley is the result of rain remembering where it has been, and choosing to return. And as the mountain dries, as the clouds part and the sky clears, the evidence remains. Dark streaks across stone, damp earth, the hush that follows a storm, and somewhere in the hidden heart of the land the sound of water still moving. It may take days, years, lifetimes, but the rain remembers. It remembers the curve of the land, the bend of a root, the warmth of sun on granite, the hush of twilight on a windswept ridge, and the mountain, though it does not move, becomes what the rain remembers, shaped by each return, softened by each storm, remembered in each drop that falls. Let's drift deeper now, into the hidden paths where water lingers, where the memory of stone carries through time like a soft hum. Beneath the surface, where roots grope through darkness and worms turn soil with silent persistence, the rain continues its journey, no longer falling but sinking, whispering its story to the ground below. Each drop that reaches the earth does not vanish. Some are caught immediately, drawn up by thirsty roots or soaked into moss. Others wander down, slipping through cracks between pebbles and grains of sand. They move slowly here, in a labyrinth of soil and stone, guided by gravity and the silent pull of capillary tension. These drops become part of something deeper, the slow hidden river of the subsurface world. In this space, water becomes memory in motion. It carries with it the trace of where it has been, a fingerprint of minerals, a faint echo of altitude and air. It dissolves particles of rock as it passes, creating new chemistry, new balance. And slowly, slowly, it begins to shape caverns and hollows in the belly of the earth. Limestone, soft and porous, listens especially well. As water seeps into its body, it begins to melt it away, not with violence, but with patience. Over centuries, entire cave systems form, galleries of stone-shaped drop by drop. Stalactites and stalagmites rise and fall, each a record of dripping time. Rain in this way becomes an architect, sculpting cathedrals from the bones of the mountain. Above ground, its presence softens everything it touches. Lichen blooms across rock faces. Trees take root in cracks made wider by water's quiet insistence. Even the smallest seeds find home in the places where rain once lingered, planting green where there was once only grey. The face of the mountain becomes a canvas painted slowly by time and touch. But rain doesn't just move downward. In valleys and basins, it begins to gather. Brooks merge with streams. Streams braid together into rivers, and rivers become the long silver cords that tie highlands to oceans. And along these threads memory flows, the history of peaks carried in silt and sediment, layered quietly into the future. You can see this memory in the floodplains, wide, flat expanses of rich soil, where each flood leaves behind a new layer. These layers are like pages in a book, read by geologists with tools and time. Each one tells of storms, of seasons, of years when the river swelled, or when the rain fell short. And through it all, stone becomes story, carried in grains as fine as dust. Even in dry lands, the rain's memory remains. In arroyos, dry channels that wait for rare floods, the earth bears the imprint of old waters. The stones are smooth, the banks carved. The land, though parched, remembers how to receive, and when the rain finally returns, it finds its old paths quickly, rushing through them with the excitement of reunion. Sometimes rain does not fall as drops, sometimes it weeps from mist, clings to leaves, or gathers on spider silk in trembling spheres. In mountain forests wrapped in cloud, this is called occult precipitation, water that arrives not by storm but by touch. The trees drink it directly from the air. The moss thickens, ferns unfurl, and everything lives in a quiet saturation, wrapped in memory made visible. Scientists study these places carefully, measuring the moisture, the absorption, the chemistry of runoff. But even the most advanced instruments cannot quite capture the way the land seems to sigh after rain, the way the colour deepens, the way the air tastes different, richer, quieter, more alive. This sensation is not imagination. When rain falls on dry soil, it releases a molecule called geosmin, carried by certain bacteria. It's what gives that beloved scent of earth after a storm. It is the smell of renewal, of return, a biological signal that something old has been touched again. In this way, our bodies remember the rain too. We are made mostly of water. It moves through us, surrounds our cells, bathes our organs, flows through our veins. The water we drink may have once fallen on a distant mountain, circled underground for decades, then emerged again in a spring. And as it enters us, it continues its journey, passing through, becoming breath, sweat, tears. We are not separate from the mountain. We are part of its hydrology. We too are carved by rain. Somewhere a glacier is melting drop by drop, and that water is finding a path carved long ago by older melts. Somewhere else a child watches rain fall against a window, unaware that those droplets once hung in the sky above a ridge older than any city. And somewhere deep in the earth, rainwater is becoming stone again, calcifying, sealing a moment in time. Even in cities where pavement interrupts the natural flow, rain still seeks its memory. It pools in gutters, slides down glass, finds the cracks in concrete. It follows gravity, as it always has, and when allowed, it seeps into the ground, hungry for soil, for root, for the old ways. Engineers build systems to control it, drains, dams, channels. But water is patient. Over time, it finds its own logic. Rivers remember their meanders, springs remember where to rise, and rain, soft and persistent, remembers the shape of stone. In places where rain is rare, people collect it with reverence. From rooftops, in jars, in cisterns built into hillsides, they treat it not as common, but as sacred. And when it falls, it is a celebration, a return, a blessing from the sky that reminds the land and us that everything cycles, everything returns. This is what rain teaches, not just nourishment, but rhythm, not just falling, but remembering. It does not erase the past, it builds upon it, it travels with it. And in every drop there is the memory of mountains. Now imagine the mountain beneath a sky just beginning to darken. The first hints of shadow stretching across the ridges like gentle fingers. The last of the day's rain has passed, and the land is glistening, not in brilliance but in softness, a sheen of memory laid quietly over every stone, every leaf, every path. This is when the mountain is most itself, shaped by water and silence, carrying the breath of every storm it has known. The ground is heavy now, full of what the clouds have offered. The scent of damp earth rises like incense from the roots of pines. In small hollows, puddles mirror the grey of the dimming sky, and beneath the surface the water continues its secret descent, seeping, listening, becoming part of the mountain once more. Even as the rain stops, its presence continues. The water does not forget. It trickles and curves, nestles into hidden channels, where it might rest for a season or surge after the next melt. Some will be drawn into the capillaries of trees and lifted into new leaves. Some will drift downward still, deeper into the crust where it may sleep for centuries. And some, soon enough, will rise again in springs, cold and clear, bearing the taste of stone and time. This is the mountain's way, to give and to hold, to be carved and yet remain. Rain does not destroy the mountain, it reveals it. With each storm, each slow erosion, each pooling drop, the true shape of the land comes forward. What looks like damage is a kind of sculpting. What seems like loss is an invitation to be remade. There are places on Earth where you can see this story most clearly. Places like the Grand Canyon, where rivers born of rain have cut through layers of ancient stone, exposing bands of colour and sediment that speak of worlds long gone. Or in Iceland, where waterfalls descend black cliffs like threads of memory, whispering the names of vanished glaciers into the air. In these places, time feels visible. Water and rock speak openly. You can almost hear their dialogue in the rush of a stream, in the hush of a fog-soaked valley. They do not rush, they do not compete. They simply move, each shaping the other with devotion. And yet there is still something mysterious about rain, something more than gravity, more than temperature and pressure. Why does it fall just so? Why does one storm split to skirt a ridge, while another lingers over a single hill for hours? Why do the same patterns return again and again, like thoughts circling in a dreaming mind? The answers lie partly in physics, in the invisible scaffolding of air currents and terrain. But they also live in the rhythm of the earth, the breath of oceans, the tilt of seasons, the memory of warmth and cold. Rain is not only a local event, it is a traveller from far away. It may begin in the evaporation of a sea thousands of miles distant. It may be born from the breath of plants in a rainforest, or the shimmer of a desert after dusk. And yet no matter how far it travels, when rain returns to a mountain, it knows where to go. Some people call this the intelligence of water. Not a thinking, but a knowing, not a mind, but a memory written into movement. It flows as if remembering each twist of rock, each shadowed bend. And it brings with it more than moisture, it brings change. Over years, this change is subtle. A creek shifts its banks. A hillside greens after long drought. A boulder, once unmoved, cracks softly from within. But over lifetimes, the change becomes a song, a valley born from a single thread of water, a lake formed in a hollow that was once a stone's heart. And we too are listeners to this song. We build our homes where the rivers run. We draw our water from the wells the rain has filled. We plant our seeds in the soil rain has softened. Our own memories are carried on its rhythms, the hush of a rainy night, the joy of the first spring shower, the sorrow of flood. We mark our time by it. We write poems in its name. Even in silence, even in stillness, rain remains with us. It moves in the air we breathe, in the fog on morning glass, in the tears we shed without knowing why. It connects us to what is vast, and reminds us that we belong to something older than ourselves. The movement of water, the shape of land, the soft persistence of return. So the next time you walk along a trail after rain, listen. Feel how your feet sink just slightly into the damp earth. Watch how drops still cling to the underside of leaves, how rocks wear a darker shade. That is not just rain you're seeing. That is time made visible. That is the sky remembering the mountain. That is the mountain remembering how to receive. And even when the clouds are gone, even when the sky is clear and the sun returns, something of that memory stays, in the grooves of the stone, in the pattern of roots, in the stillness of a pool untouched by wind. The mountain does not forget. The rain will come again. It always does. And when it does, it will find the same paths, the same rhythms. It will shape and be shaped. It will rise and fall. And through it all, it will carry with it the story of stone, not as weight, but as flow, not as burden, but as song. Because in the end, the rain does not simply fall, it remembers. High above the treetops, where the air thins and the blue of the sky turns almost violet, the wind carries a memory too old to measure. It does not speak in words, but in currents, in curls and spirals, in sudden hushes and long, patient sighs. This is not just moving air. This is breath that has travelled through time. These are the winds that remember where mountains once rose, where glaciers once stood, where oceans once whispered against ancient shores now long gone. When we feel wind on our skin, we often think only of the present, a breeze, a gust, a chill. But that same air may have brushed the feathers of a bird flying over a desert just days before. It may have curled around a mountain ridge in Tibet, or slipped through pine branches in a northern forest, or picked up grains of salt from an open sea. Wind is not still. It is always gathering, always moving, always becoming part of something new, and in that motion it remembers. Altitude shapes wind like stone shapes a river. As air rises, it cools, it becomes thinner, quieter. At higher elevations the pressure is low, and every particle has more space to drift, to stretch, to whisper. Here, in these rarefied heights, wind takes on a different character, not just forceful, but sculptural. It wraps itself around cliffs and ridgelines, brushing snow into cornices, sculpting ice into delicate forms, and sending dry grasses swaying in a rhythm older than language. Mountains do not just endure wind, they create it. When sun warms one side of a peak and leaves the other in shadow, air moves to balance the difference. Warm air rises, cool air sinks. Valleys cradle stillness while summits stir the skies. This movement, this constant rebalancing, gives birth to the local winds that thread through foothills and alpine passes, katabatic winds that slide downward with cold weight, anabatic winds that rise with daytime heat. Each one a response to the mountain's breath. But there are older winds still, global currents that circle the earth with patient determination. The jet stream, high above where clouds travel, sweeps eastward, carrying with it the history of continents. It moves so quickly that a single parcel of air can cross an ocean in less than a day, and yet as fast as it flows, it still carries the imprint of terrain. It is diverted by the mountains, pushed by high-pressure ridges, pulled by storms. It remembers the presence of elevation even where the ground below has changed. In some places, winds become part of the land's identity. The Mistral of southern France, dry and fierce, the Föhn of the Alps, warm and sudden, the Santa Anas of California, crackling with heat and static. These winds are not random. They are the Earth's quiet reply to changes in heat and pressure, shaped by valleys, ridges, and age-old paths between them. To understand wind is to understand movement without destination. It carries pollen, ash, seeds. It sculpts dunes and clears skies. It weaves together the surface of oceans, carving waves, pulling moisture into the clouds, setting storms in motion. And still it listens. It knows when to curl around a cliffside and when to rush through a mountain pass. It remembers where to return. Climbers at high altitudes know the voice of wind better than most. They speak of it not just as force, but as presence, a constant companion on narrow ridges and icy slopes. They learn to read its tone, to feel its warnings. A sudden stillness before a gust, a shift in direction, a drop in pressure. These signals are not loud, but they are ancient, passed down from wind to mountain, from stone to bone. In many places, the wind has carved more than feelings. It's carved form, hoodoos, arches, wave-like stones polished over millennia by nothing more than sand and air. These are sculptures of remembrance, reminders that even something invisible can shape what is solid. The rock does not resist. It accepts. It yields, slowly, beautifully. And in certain conditions, the wind itself becomes visible, not just by what it moves, but by what it carries. Snow whipped into streams that twist in the air like silken ribbons, dust lifted from dry plains building into golden clouds, mist caught in a sudden draught lifting from lake to treetop with dreamlike grace. These are moments when the wind shows its shape, not by presence, but by what clings to it. You can almost imagine the wind pausing just for a breath, over a familiar ridge. You can almost feel it pause and remember, the way the sun falls here in late spring, the way snow gathers in the hollows in winter, the scent of lichen and pine, the distant hum of a waterfall half frozen in shade. The mountain remembers the wind, and the wind, in turn, remembers the mountain. Somewhere high above the timberline where no trees grow and silence holds the shape of emptiness, the wind moves freely. There is nothing to catch it but rock and sky. It does not rush here. It glides, slow and wide, and in that gliding, it carries the soft sound of centuries, the wind that whispered over ancient glaciers, the wind that circled through ice ages and deserts and back again. Even now, when a storm approaches, the wind arrives first, a messenger. It tells the mountain what is coming. It lifts birds into flight or presses them low. It stirs the grass into murmurs. It brushes across bare stone like fingers turning a worn page. And the mountain listens, as it always has, letting itself be reshaped again and again by this soft, unseen hand. Because the wind is not only air in motion, it is history, made breath. It is the space between what was and what will be, and high among the peaks, where the sky meets stone, it is the closest thing to time itself. Let's drift deeper now, into the story that air carries, into the memory of altitudes that still linger in the breath of wind. Long after mountains have crumbled and valleys have filled, the wind continues its path as though nothing has changed. It follows old roots, invisible to us but etched into the patterns of the atmosphere, like a melody that remains even after the instrument is gone. Air does not forget where it has risen and where it has fallen. When it flows across a plain or curls around a hill, it does so with momentum gathered from 1,000 moments before. The landscape below might seem flat and open, but the wind behaves as if the peaks still exist. Scientists call this inertia, a remnant of motion, but to the wind it is something more. It is muscle memory, the way a dancer moves through a room even after the music stops. There are layers to wind, each with its own temperature, its own direction, its own memory. Close to the ground, the air swirls in small eddies, stirred by trees and buildings alive with dust and scent. Higher up, it smooths out, moving steadily like a great invisible river. And even higher still, in the upper atmosphere, the jet streams circle the earth with ceaseless grace, pushed by temperature, pulled by pressure, bent by the rising and falling of terrain far below. Mountains, even those worn down by time, continue to shape this movement. Their presence slows wind, lifts it, splits it, bends it. Even in their silence they speak. When moist air rises up the windward side of a mountain, it cools and condenses, forming clouds, sometimes rain. The leeward side, in turn, is left dry, shaped by what has been taken. This is called the rain shadow, but it is more than absence. It is the shape of memory itself. In these spaces, the wind carries stories across continents. It gathers ash from distant volcanoes, pollen from unseen forests, salt from faraway oceans. Each particle becomes part of the narrative. Each breeze becomes a bridge between places, and slowly, gently, the air reshapes not only land, but life. Plants bend their leaves to the direction of prevailing winds. Animals build their nests and burrows in places where the air moves softly, not fiercely. Over generations, wings have stretched wider, fur has thickened, bones have grown lighter, all to answer the wind's call. Evolution itself listens to the breath of the planet. And we too have always followed the wind. We sailed with it across oceans. We built our cities in its shelter. We watched the way smoke lifted into the sky to guess what weather might come. Even now, with machines and satellites, we still listen to the rustle of leaves, the rattle of windows, the hush that arrives before a storm. We may not speak its language fluently, but we have always known it matters. In old stories, wind is often alive. It is a spirit, a whispering god, a messenger. Cultures around the world gave it names: Boreas, Zephyr, Sirocco, Khamsin. They knew it could bring fire or rain, warmth or frost. It could carry a ship safely to harbour or scatter seeds across a field. It was never just air, it was will. But science too sees the wind's intelligence, not as thought, but as pattern. Meteorologists study the Coriolis effect and the way Earth's spin bends the path of moving air. Climatologists map trade winds and cyclones. Engineers design buildings to sway with gusts, not resist them. Even birds and aircraft now ride thermals, those invisible rivers of warm rising air, to conserve energy and travel farther. At the centre of it all is a truth too simple to ignore. Wind moves because of difference in temperature, in pressure, in terrain. Where air is warm, it rises. Where it's cold, it sinks. And the dance between those opposites becomes a song that never ends. Every breeze is born of balance seeking balance, every gust a gesture toward equilibrium. Still, in this constant motion, something steady remains. The high passes between mountains, the channels carved through stone, the cliff edges where air lifts like a sigh. These places gather wind not just today but always. They are as dependable as tides, as moonlight, and in them wind finds its voice. You can stand in these places and feel it, not just as chill or movement, but as presence. You can hear it hum against rock, whistle through grass, knock gently on trees with stories to share. And if you listen long enough, if you let the rush quiet your own thoughts, you might begin to feel what the mountain feels, the long memory of air, the soft persistence of flow, the patience of being reshaped again and again without resistance. There are places where the wind has carved its way into culture. In high Himalayan villages, prayer flags flutter day and night, their colours and symbols carried into the sky with every breath of air. In deserts, nomads build low, rounded homes with entrances that turn away from the wind's path, honouring its strength and respecting its temper. And in the high Andes, children learn to whistle with blades of grass, mimicking the sound of air between peaks. These are not inventions, they are remembrances, echoes of wind's enduring presence in daily life. Because the wind, though unseen, is never absent. It tugs at sleeves, it plays with hair, it rustles paper and carries laughter and scent and sorrow. Even in the stillest places, where it seems nothing moves, the air waits. It gathers its breath in the hollows of rock, in the branches of trees, in the open curve of the sky. And when it finally stirs, it carries not only the dust of the moment, but the long, quiet remembrance of everything it has passed, the contours of ancient cliffs, the scent of once green meadows, the hush of glacial wind. And through it all, it continues to flow, not toward a goal but through a rhythm, not to conquer, but to remember. Now the sky begins to deepen, slipping into the blues and silvers of evening, and still the wind moves, softer now, gentler, like a lullaby across the stones. It has travelled far today, rising from the valley floor, brushing past the ridges, curling around bare peaks before flowing onward, toward forests, plains and oceans beyond. But here, high among the remnants of ancient mountains, it pauses. For just a moment it lingers, not to rest, but to remember. The mountaintop, stripped of all but the hardest lichen and smallest roots, bears the full touch of air. There is no shelter here, only openness, and in that openness the wind speaks most clearly. It carries no words, yet it offers understanding. The kind that arrives not in sound, but in presence, in the way it moves the grass, lifts a falcon's wing, hums low in the rocks like the fading pulse of a heartbeat too old to name. This wind remembers. It has passed through canyons carved by rivers long vanished. It has watched glaciers retreat, has carried volcanic ash across sleeping seas, has circled the globe more times than any creature ever could. It was here when the peaks were higher, when the ice was thicker, when mammoths wandered beneath the cliffs. And though the land has changed, the wind remains, reshaped only by what it chooses to carry. Tonight, as the stars emerge and the air cools, the mountain listens. The wind, though it whispers, is not silent. It tells of warmth moving toward cold, of pressure seeking balance, of stories spun across the curve of the earth. It brushes past stone that was once seafloor, long lifted skyward. It gathers the scent of pine, the chill of snowmelt, the dryness of summer rock. It braids them together and carries them forward, a tapestry made not of colour, but of air. Down in the forests, animals sense this change. Leaves quiver, fur lifts slightly, wings adjust. Even the smallest moth resting beneath a fern responds to the shifting rhythm. And somewhere in a distant village, a window creaks, a candle flickers, a grandmother pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The wind does not announce itself, but it enters nonetheless, through cracks, through trees, through time. And the wind that whispers over the old altitudes carries more than just temperature. It carries memory. In some caves hidden in limestone hills, scientists have studied how wind once moved. They examine ancient deposits, thin layers of dust, pollen, soot, carried into dark stone chambers by air from long ago. In those layers are the fingerprints of old climates, old forests, even old fires. The wind, it turns out, is not just a messenger. It is an archivist. It stores fragments of the world as it travels, leaves pieces behind in quiet places so that others may one day listen. Not all wind is gentle. Some races with storm and thunder, tears branches from trees, bends metal and floods valleys. But even in its fiercest forms, there is a pattern, a rhythm that echoes across centuries. The places that receive the strongest winds are often the ones that have always received them. The coastlines, the plains, the mountain passes. These sites are not cursed, they are known. The wind remembers them, and so it returns. And we, in our smallness, build within that knowledge. We plant windbreaks of tall trees, raise turbines where the gusts are strongest, construct buildings that lean into the air, not away from it. We've learned slowly that to live with wind is to live with change. It cannot be stopped, only shaped. And in shaping it, we are shaped too. There are ancient stones, tall, narrow, standing rocks, placed in patterns across moors and highlands, some thousands of years old. No one knows exactly why they were set there, but when the wind moves through them, it makes sound. Not a song, but a low, breathy moan, like the sky itself speaking through the gaps. Perhaps the people who placed them there weren't just marking space. Perhaps they were tuning it, listening, always listening to what the wind had to say. Because the wind is not bound by time. It circles, it lifts, it returns. The air we breathe today may once have been exhaled by a deer on a tundra, by a monk on a distant cliff, by a flower opening under a forgotten sun. It may have rushed past stone in a storm 10,000 years ago, only to circle back now, gentle, cool, kind. This is why the high places feel sacred, not because they are closer to the stars, though they are, but because they receive the wind unfiltered. They are where the earth and the air meet most directly, where the breath of the planet can be felt without interruption. To stand there is to be inside the memory of motion, to feel not just the now, but the long before and the yet to come. And when you leave the mountain, when you descend back into trees and towns and time, the wind comes with you. In the scent on your jacket, in the coolness on your cheek, in the quiet inside your lungs, you carry it, whether you notice or not. You become part of its memory too, so when the wind stirs tomorrow, when it rustles your curtains or bends the grass at your feet, pause, let it touch you. Let it remind you that you are made of breath and distance, of movement and return. You are not separate from the air, you are shaped by it, and in time you shape it too. Because the wind, like the mountain, never forgets. It simply keeps moving. Before rain falls, before rivers run, before clouds gather above the earth, there is a quiet and invisible climb. Water, so often known for its downward journey, sometimes rises, not with force, not with a noise, but with a softness so gentle it often goes unnoticed. This is the beginning of everything. The moment water lifts itself from leaf and lake, from soil and skin, and begins to climb backward through air. It begins with warmth. When sunlight touches the surface of a stream or the skin of a pond, tiny molecules of water are stirred to life. They jitter and wiggle, dancing their way into invisibility. This is evaporation. The great lifting where water transforms into vapour and disappears into the sky. And it is not limited to oceans or rivers. It happens in every dewdrop, every puddle, every cell of every living thing. Plants too play their part. Their leaves are not still, they breathe. Through tiny mouths called stomata, they exhale moisture into the air, sending thin threads of vapour upward. This is transpiration, and together with evaporation, it becomes something vast, a force strong enough to fill the sky with clouds. In fact, forests feed the rain. A single tree can release hundreds of litres of water each day, each drop a quiet departure, each a step upward. In the dense green of tropical jungles, where the canopy sweats under the weight of sun, this rising moisture is thick and constant. It builds humidity like a fog inside the lungs of the forest. There, water doesn't simply rise, it breathes. The jungle exhales into the atmosphere, building columns of invisible vapour that stretch high above the treetops. These are the forest's gifts to the sky, silent offerings, scentless and soft. But water does not climb alone. It gathers particles as it lifts. Salt from ocean spray, dust from soil, the tiniest fragments of pollen or ash. These become the seeds of clouds. The vapour, once alone, clings to them as it cools at higher altitudes, condensing into droplets. And suddenly what was invisible becomes visible again, a mist, cloud, a sky, filling with the memory of what once rested on the earth. The journey upward is not rushed. As air rises, it expands and cools, cradling the vapour in its palm. It may take hours, even days for the lifted water to reach its resting place among the clouds. And sometimes it goes higher still, reaching the upper troposphere, where temperatures are bitter and the air is thin. There, droplets freeze into ice crystals, becoming the skeletons of cirrus clouds, delicate thread-like wisps that stretch across blue in silence. To the eye, this rising water is unseen, but its effects are everywhere. On humid days, we feel its weight on our skin. On cool mornings, we see its breath as fog above a field. It clings to windows, gathers in lungs, carries scent. And above us, in the shapes that drift and build and fade, it becomes the architecture of weather. In mountainous regions, this ascent is even more pronounced. As moist air is pushed up slope by wind, it cools rapidly, causing vapor to condense sooner and more fully. The mountains become engines of cloud-making, drawing water upward and shaping the sky. This process, called orographic uplift, is responsible for much of the rainfall that nourishes alpine meadows and glacier-fed streams. But before it falls, it must climb. And in deserts, where the ground is hot and dry, evaporation happens quickly. Water lifted from shallow springs or narrow oases rises in great waves of shimmer, heat distortions that blur the horizon. Here the climb is harsh, the air greedy. Yet even in these barren places, water finds its way into the sky, carrying stories of survival, of endurance. What's most remarkable is how often this journey happens without notice. While rain is celebrated and loud drumming visible, evaporation is quiet. It asks for no attention, but it is just as powerful. Without it, there would be no clouds, no storms, no rivers renewed. The upward journey of water is the beginning of the cycle, the first breath in a long conversation between sky and earth. It happens on your skin too. As you walk beneath the sun, water rises from your body. Sweat, breath, the gentle vapor of your presence. We are part of this climb. We are not separate from the cycle. In every exhale, in every warm touch, we contribute. Our own bodies mirror the movement of lakes and leaves, lifting moisture skyward with every passing moment. And yet this act, so universal, so ancient, remains largely unseen. It reminds us that some of the most important journeys happen quietly. That ascent does not always mean striving or noise. Sometimes it means rising softly, invisibly, with grace. Because water does not fight the air. It joins it. It trusts the warmth, trusts the path, trusts that what leaves will one day return. And in that trust it climbs. Let's drift deeper now, into the invisible stairways where water rises still, higher and higher through columns of sky. Though unseen, this journey is precise, shaped by temperature, by light, by the invisible hands of pressure and time. The water that climbs backward through air does so in quiet agreement with the atmosphere, obeying laws older than any living thing, older than the mountains themselves. Above the canopy of the rainforest, beyond the still surface of lakes and the shivering skin of grasslands, water is drawn upward by energy. The sun, though 93 million miles away, reaches down and touches every surface with warmth. That warmth lifts molecules one by one into the open air. It's a pull that never stops. Even when the sky is overcast, even at night, the climb continues, just slower, more subtle, a whisper instead of a song. This rising water changes the very air it enters. It adds weight without adding mass, a kind of heaviness we feel as humidity. And as vapor gathers in the lower atmosphere, it begins to affect weather, making the air more prone to instability, to swirling and rising. Heat rises with it, lifting warm, wet parcels of air high into the sky where cooler winds are waiting. The result is a dance, a vertical ballet of currents, pressure, condensation. The water that rises does not forget where it came from. It carries with it the chemical fingerprints of its origin. Scientists can trace a drop of water in the clouds back to its source, a river in the Amazon, a glacier in the Alps, a coral lagoon. Isotopes, minerals, even microorganisms make the journey. Some survive the lift, some seed new places, some dissolve into the sky forever, but all of it in some way is preserved. And as the vapor climbs, it encounters colder layers of the atmosphere. It slows, huddles, condenses, turning from gas to liquid again. It joins other droplets, forming the soft outlines of clouds. These clouds are not only the visible signs of lifted water, they are maps of motion, layered canvases of temperature and time. A cumulus cloud, billowing high with sunlit edges, tells of strong upward currents. A flat, low stratus cloud speaks of a slow, wide ascent, moisture rising in calm agreement with cooler air. In mountainous regions, this moment of condensation often occurs just above the peaks. The water that rose from the valleys gathers and thickens at altitude, wrapping the summits in a halo of mist. This is how the mountain clouds are born, not only from wind, but from water that has remembered the path upward. And here these clouds linger, nestling against cliffs, slipping through passes, leaving droplets on stone like small clear fingerprints. Sometimes the clouds release their burden quickly. Rain falls, and the water begins its descent once more, but other times the droplets remain suspended, dancing with light, shifting with temperature, floating just long enough to reshape the sky. In these suspended moments, the vapour is neither of the earth nor fully of the heavens. It is between. It hovers in a kind of liminal grace, waiting for the world to decide which direction it will next take, up again or down. This liminality gives rise to one of nature's most delicate gifts, fog. Fog is simply a cloud that has come down to walk among us, born from the same upward journey, but choosing to rest closer to the ground. It forms when rising water cools quickly near the surface, saturating the air with softness. In valleys, in forests, along coastlines and open fields, fog settles gently, and everything it touches becomes quieter, more intimate. Trees blur, light diffuses, sound thickens, and in that hushed space we are reminded of how water, once risen, returns with tenderness. But not all water climbs alone, some of it hitchhikes, clinging to insects, rising with birds, lifted by wind, wrapped in the updrafts of fires or the spiralling arms of a storm. In hurricanes, massive columns of air draw moisture from oceans with furious intensity, lifting billions of gallons skyward in hours. The clouds that form are towering giants, their peaks stretching into the stratosphere, built entirely from water's backward climb. These storms, fierce and wide, are born from the same small evaporation that begins on the quiet surface of a sea. And in the gentler corners of the world, the same process unfolds with less drama, but no less wonder. In meadows, morning dew evaporates slowly as the sun rises. In alpine valleys, ice melts into vapour before it ever becomes a stream. Even snow, under sunlight, can sublimate directly into air, bypassing liquid form entirely. Each of these is a different path upward, but all belong to the same movement, the sky gathering what it once gave. In ancient times, people spoke of water spirits, beings who lived in the mist, who rose from wells and vanished into clouds. They knew intuitively that water was never still, never finished. It was always in motion, always transforming, and they understood that this motion was sacred. To offer water to the sky, whether through ritual or through nature, was to trust that what rose would one day return. And it does, though it may circle the globe first, though it may freeze for centuries in the heart of a glacier, though it may linger in the belly of a cloud or drift in the winds for days. Eventually, every drop that climbs backward through air finds its way home, as rain, as snow, as breath. This is the elegance of the hydrologic cycle, not just movement, but remembrance. Not just change, but return. Every ascent contains the promise of descent. Every lifting carries with it a vow to fall again, to nourish again, to begin again. The mountain does not speak in words, but the clouds know what it has said. Long before the sun rises, when the sky is still unsure of its own light, a hush lingers over the ridges and valleys. The peaks sit like patient old guardians, their jagged silhouettes soft against the early blue. And just above them, the clouds begin to form, slow, ghostly curls of mist drawn up from the warming soil, the sleeping rocks, the hidden rivers beneath. The clouds, you see, are not born from nowhere. They are memory made visible. They are breath, lifted, vapour, gathered. They rise not as strangers, but as children of the land. When sunlight touches stone, something ancient stirs. The warmth seeps into the cracks and crevices of cliffs and spires, nudging the tiniest beads of water loose. These droplets, once buried in frost or deep within mossy veins, begin to rise. Not alone, never alone, but with one another, like a slow dance of soft escape. They evaporate, become invisible, and drift into air that already carries stories from yesterday's fog. Last week's thunder, a storm that kissed another peak far away. Science calls it evapotranspiration, the great quiet lift of water from soil and leaf, from bark and skin. Trees give off their quiet sighs, lakes shimmer their way skyward, and even rock, which seems so still, releases what it once drank. Everything rises, bit by bit. By mid-morning, the sky above a mountain begins to swirl with what it knows. Wisps build, drift, collide. Air cools as it climbs. And then, condensation. The hidden becomes visible, mist becomes cloud, and cloud becomes a memory carried on wind. This is where the poetry and the physics meet. Clouds are not just moisture. They are shapeshifters, made from countless tiny droplets, each one less than 1/100th of a millimetre wide. Yet together, they catch light, bend colour, and cradle shadow. They drift across valleys like thoughts across a sleeping mind. But mountains shape more than just what lifts. They bend wind itself. As air moves across the surface of Earth, it doesn't move freely. It must rise over hills, push through canyons, and curl around summits. When moist air climbs the windward side of a mountain, it cools rapidly. Cooler air can't hold as much water, so the vapour condenses. Rain falls, snow dusts the ridges, and the air, now dry, continues down the leeward slope, often leaving the other side parched. This is the rain shadow, a place shaped not by storm but by silence, a space where clouds have emptied themselves. So when you see a cloud clinging to the side of a mountain, curling around its shoulder or hanging gently in its lap, you are watching the mountain breathe, not with lungs, but with height, not with air, but with the quiet conversation between temperature and time. There's a kind of memory in this cycle, not memory like a photograph, but memory like a rhythm, a pattern traced again and again until the land and the sky become familiar with one another. The same places call to the same clouds, the same winds return to their turns, and the stone, though it never moves, becomes the reason the sky changes. Even the shape of a mountain matters. A sharp peak carves air differently than a rounded dome. Ridges funnel gusts, valleys cradle stillness. These topographies script the choreography of clouds. They sculpt the sky without ever leaving the ground, and the clouds in return remember. They gather again and again above the same cliffs. They form lenticular shapes, smooth layered discs like stacks of porcelain saucers, when the air flows just right over a summit. These clouds do not drift, they hover, fixed in place by invisible waves of rising and falling air. To watch one is to see the mountain's echo written in water and light. At night, when the wind quiets and the stars peer down with gentle indifference, the clouds sometimes vanish. But even then, the mountain holds what remains. It cools, it settles, it waits, and the next day it will lift its breath once more. Some say the earth forgets, but perhaps it only remembers differently, in cycles, in patterns, in clouds. So when you next see mist creeping up a forested slope or a cotton-soft crown perched on a distant summit, remember that is the sky listening. That is water returning home. That is the breath of a mountain, held, just for a moment, in the open hands of the air. Let's drift deeper now, into the layers beneath the mist, where the breath of the mountain becomes part of a larger, older conversation. Imagine water, that simple shape of 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, moving not in drops or rivers, but in vapour so small it slips between particles of dust and sunlight. This water once rested in ice. It once threaded through the roots of an alpine flower. It once clung to the fur of a snow fox, curled in the shelter of a wind-slick stone. Now it floats, invisible, seeking, and in its search, it climbs. Climbing air is not like climbing scent. We often think of clouds as temporary, but they are part of a cycle more enduring than stone. Clouds are breath made visible. They are the earth's way of lifting its story, sharing it, and bringing it back. The echoes they carry do not vanish. They transform. They pass from sky to soil to root to fruit to thought. A raindrop that once hovered in mist may now be part of the tea you sip, the stream you step across, the leaf that shelters a sleeping bird. And in you too, that water moves. It becomes part of blood, of breath, of dream. You're shaped by the clouds, even if you never notice. Their echoes live in you. What they've carried you now carry, what they've given you hold. This is the quiet miracle of the sky, that something so vast, so shifting, so endlessly remade can feel so familiar, that the clouds you watched yesterday are gone, but their gift remains, and that tomorrow more will come, not the same but not strangers, carriers of new echoes, gatherers of new memory, shapes of time unfolding. So the next time you look up and see a single cloud floating alone, or a sky full of soft rolling grey, let it speak. Let it remind you that nothing truly leaves, that everything lifted will return, that silence too can be filled with meaning, because clouds are not just the sky's weather, they are its memory. Fog does not shout. It arrives softly, like a memory returning in fragments. It drifts into valleys, curls around trees, presses gently against windows and hillsides without ever needing to announce itself. Unlike storm or sunlight, fog is content to whisper. And in that whisper there are maps, not drawn on paper or carved in stone, but held in the folds of the air. Maps made of stillness and silence, of paths that only become visible when everything else fades. Mist is its gentler cousin, thinner and lighter, rising in the early morning from damp grass or resting quietly above a calm lake. It floats, suspended between earth and sky, holding a place that is neither here nor there, and in that in-between space there is something sacred. Something that slows time and makes the ordinary strange again. Something that asks the world to look closer. These veils of water made from droplets so small they remain suspended in the air are more than weather. They are records of temperature, of moisture, of terrain. They form only under certain conditions, when the air cools just enough to reach its dew point, when moisture is present, when the wind is still. That balance is delicate, and when it is met, fog begins to bloom like a breath held close to the ground. In coastal regions, fog rolls in from the sea. It forms where cold ocean currents meet warm air, rising like ghosts from the waves, slipping over dunes and harbour lights, wrapping the land in grey. Sailors once called it a wall, but that was only part of the truth. The fog may obscure, but it also reveals. It tells where the wind is coming from. It outlines the hidden shape of land. It moves in ways that speak of distance and direction. Mariners learn to read it, not just avoid it. In forests, fog threads itself through branches and moss, quieting sound and soaking into leaves. It is a presence more than a thing, a kind of hush that settles into every gap and curve. Trees that live in fog-drenched places have learned to drink from it. They capture moisture on their needles and leaves, channeling it downward into their roots. This is called fog drip, and in some ecosystems, it provides more water than rain. The cloud forest, living always at the edge of mist, becomes a place that survives on breath alone. Even deserts, with all their dryness, know fog. Along the coastlines of Namibia and Chile, cold ocean currents meet hot desert air, and fog rolls inland, bringing life to places that would otherwise remain silent. Beetles climb to the top of sand dunes, lifting their bodies to catch droplets on their shells. Lichens grow on rocks that rarely see rain. The map of survival in these places is drawn in fog, not in water. Not in flood, but in the tiniest beads of mist. And in the highlands, where mountains crave the cold night air, fog forms before dawn, spilling through valleys like a slow river. It hides the familiar. It paints the world in grayscale, and it quiets everything: footsteps, birdsong, the rustle of wind. You can stand in a field you've known your whole life and feel like you are somewhere entirely new. Not because the land has changed, but because the fog has given you a new way to see it. This is what fog offers, a different kind of map. Not one made for distance or speed, but for presence. A fog map doesn't lead you to a destination. It invites you to notice, to pause, to listen for shapes instead of seeing them, to walk slowly with your hand slightly raised, as if feeling your way through the memory of the land. For animals, these maps are essential. Insects navigate by scent trails that linger longer in fog. Birds lower their flight paths, following the folds of land more closely. Deer pause in the hush, their ears alert to the softened sounds. And humans too adjust. We speak more softly. We move more carefully. Fog teaches caution, not from fear, but from reverence. There is science behind all of this. Behind the way, droplets scatter light, creating the blur that defines fog. Behind the way, air temperature shifts near the ground at dawn. Behind the mechanics of condensation and suspension. But what matters just as much is how it feels. Because fog is not just a phenomenon, it is a change in perception, a change in how we inhabit space. It creates intimacy with the land. It draws the world inward. In fog, far things vanish and near things become everything. The branch beside you becomes a sculpture. The path beneath your feet becomes a line of mystery. The sound of water dripping from a leaf becomes music. In fog, the map is not drawn ahead of you. It unfolds with every step. And mist, lighter and more playful, often arrives first. It clings to riverbanks, drifts through meadows, weaves across lakes like a dancer in slow motion. It doesn't last long, but while it lingers, it makes the world glow. The sunlight caught in it becomes golden. The air feels closer, like the sky has come down to earth for a while. And when it lifts, it leaves behind not dampness, but memory. So when fog rolls in, when mist covers the land, it is not erasure. It is not confusion. It is another kind of clarity, one not found through sight but through attention. It reveals what we overlook. It softens what we hurry past. It invites us to move not by compass or clock, but by breath. Because some maps are not meant to guide you elsewhere. Some maps are meant to bring you home. Let's drift deeper now into the folds and layers where fog becomes more than weather, where it becomes a memory draped across the land, a slow movement of the unseen. In every patch of fog there is a pattern, a quiet cartography etched not in lines but in softness. These maps do not speak in distance or direction. They speak in closeness, in temperature, in moisture and breath. They are drawn and redrawn every morning, sometimes vanishing before the sun even rises. In cities, fog behaves differently. It clings to rooftops, nestles between buildings, swirls around lampposts like slow smoke. It changes light, bending it until every street becomes its own world. Headlights become halos. The glow of neon turns to watercolour. In this softened world, even the familiar becomes mysterious. The fog does not erase the city. It reimagines it. A park you've crossed 100 times becomes a forest. A sidewalk becomes a path without end. The rhythm of footsteps echoes louder, and the hush above feels ancient, even under glass towers. This is the gift of fog. It asks us to feel our way through. It is a map of uncertainty, but not of fear. Rather, it teaches us that knowing every step ahead is not always the point. That movement itself, slow, deliberate, alert, and is its own kind of navigation. The lack of distance sharpens perception. Each branch, each fence round, each gesture becomes a landmark. We see less, but we notice more. And in the natural world, this shift is everything. Plants that grow in foggy places evolve to capture the air's hidden moisture. Some have leaves shaped to funnel droplets directly to their roots. Others bloom only in seasons when the mist comes most often. Along California's coast, entire redwood forests rely on fog to quench their thirst in the dry months. Fog condenses on their towering limbs, falls as gentle drip to the forest floor, and nourishes an entire web of life. In these forests, water doesn't just fall from above, it materializes from the air itself, drawn into being by stillness. In other places, the fog lingers longer, held in place by valleys or kept low by cooler temperatures. These are the places where fog settles like a blanket, where it holds tight to the land, refusing to lift until late morning. Farmers wake into this softness, moving by feel through their fields. Animals stir carefully, their scents carried wider by damp air. Birds wait. The world begins slowly, wrapped in vapour, until the sun gently burns the fog away, not with force, but with patience. Fog has no sharp edges. Its movement is fluid, its shape ever-changing. Yet its behaviour is guided by terrain. Hills funnel it, trees hold it, open spaces let it spread. And just as rivers carve valleys, fog carves perception, revealing and concealing in gentle shifts. One moment you see a hillside, the next it is gone. Then it reappears, softened and glowing as if emerging from sleep. The map of the world becomes something that breathes, appearing, vanishing, returning. To some, this can feel unsettling. The loss of sight, the sense of being surrounded, But for others, it is freeing. Fog removes the horizon, quiets the future, and brings the present into clearer view. There is no need to rush in fog, there is nowhere to be but here. Each step is a discovery. Each pause, a choice. You are not lost. You are simply surrounded by wonder you cannot yet name. In mythology, fog often signals transformation. It marks the edge of magic, the border between worlds. A hero enters the mist and emerges changed. A village disappears for 100 years. A path once known leads somewhere new. These stories reflect something ancient in us, the knowing that in fog we become different. Not by turning into someone else, but by softening into who we are. Fog quiets the outside so we might hear the inside. This sense of inwardness is part of what makes fog so powerful. It is a weather that feels internal. You don't just see it, you move through it, you breathe it. It wraps around you. It becomes part of your body, part of your skin. It slows your pulse, opens your senses, asks you to listen not only outward, but inward. You become both traveller and landscape, both seeker and seen. And in that intimacy there is memory. Some people remember fog from childhood, the way it covered schoolyards, softened streetlights, turned the world into a mystery of fences and boots and cold fingers. Others recall fog from travel, the way it made foreign cities seem dreamlike, turned ancient ruins into silhouettes. These memories are not about where they were, they're about how they felt. The softness, the quiet, the way the world, so often fast and bright, became something slow and muted and wide. Even animals remember fog and change their habits when it comes. Insects hide, birds stay low, predators become more cautious. Prey become harder to find as the entire web of life shifts slightly, adapting to this new map drawn in mist. Evolution has written fog into instinct, and still, each time it returns, it feels like the first, because fog does not announce itself with thunder or wind. It simply arrives, and everything around it responds. Scientists track fog now with satellites and sensors. They measure its density, its moisture content, its role in climate. They know it helps cool the earth, protects crops, brings water where rain does not fall. But even with all this data, fog remains elusive. You cannot hold it. You cannot carry it. You can only be inside it for a little while until it lifts. And that, perhaps, is its greatest map of all, a map of presence, a lesson in how to move through uncertainty with grace, a reminder that clarity does not always mean visibility, that sometimes what we cannot see is what teaches us how to walk more gently, more attentively, more alive, because the world does not always reveal itself in lines and labels. Sometimes it reveals itself in mist. Now the morning fog begins to lift. Slowly, as if the sky itself is exhaling, the pale veil thins. Trees reappear. Hills take back their outlines. The world, once hushed in softness, begins to find its shape again. But something lingers in the air, not the mist itself, but the memory of it. The calm it brought, the intimacy, the quiet way it reshaped space, not by building something new, but by covering what was always there. And in this soft parting, the fog leaves behind more than dew. It leaves awareness of how much can be hidden in plain sight, of how much of the world is sensed, not seen, of how stillness can be its own kind of knowing. Because though the fog has cleared, what it revealed remains. The path you walked under mist looks different now, not because it changed, but because you have. You've seen it as a shape among shadows, felt it with your feet, trusted it without the comfort of distance. And now, with clarity returned, you notice what was missing before. The curve of a branch, the smoothness of stone, the way light settles on moss. Fog teaches you how to look, and then it gently steps aside. This is the quiet power of mist. It doesn't demand your attention. It invites it. And when it's gone, the invitation remains open. In certain places, the memory of fog lives on in the land itself. Valleys carved by rivers hold moisture longer. Old forests, heavy with lichen and shade, catch and keep the mist. These places breathe slowly. Even on dry days, the air feels thicker, the light softer. You sense the fog's return before it arrives, in the way birds call, in the way the temperature leans toward cool. These places remember, and in remembering they prepare. Fog is not bound by day or season. It arrives at dawn, at dusk, in spring and in frost. It settles above warm soil after a summer rain, or rises like steam from snow-covered ground. It weaves through ancient ruins, presses against glass on lonely highways, drifts across lakes that seem to hold the sky, and in every form it carries the same message. Slow down, be still, feel where you are. Travellers through history have spoken of fog as threshold, a moment between places, between knowing and not knowing, between day and night, between one thought and the next. And in that threshold there is room for wonder, for reconsidering the familiar, for seeing again what has grown invisible through habit. In coastal towns, the foghorns once called through the mist, low and slow, guiding ships by sound alone, a voice for the unseen, a signal that even when vision fails, there are other ways to know where you are. That resonance matters. That presence can be felt, not just observed. In your own life there are fogs too, moments where clarity vanishes, where decisions feel distant, where paths fade. It's easy to fear these times, to want the fog to lift. But perhaps, like the weather, these moments are offering something else. Not confusion, but pause. Not absence, but invitation. To listen more, to move with intention, to let what's near become enough. Mist has always been a part of human stories. In ancient myth, it was the curtain between worlds, the veil across the eyes of gods, the breath of the earth itself. Even now, in literature and song, mist holds a place, as metaphor, as mood, as mirror. It reflects not what is, but how it feels. It turns emotion into atmosphere. Artists paint it, poets describe it, photographers chase it through meadows and alleys, and all of them, in their own way, are trying to hold something unholdable, the way fog makes the world feel, the gentleness, the mystery, the way it arrives without warning and leaves without goodbye. And even when it's gone, fog leaves behind its imprint, in droplets clinging to branches, in soil darkened with moisture, in the hush that remains just a little longer, as if the land itself has not yet remembered how to be loud. In you carry the mist in your breath, in your memory, in the way you walk after it has passed. You remember what it taught you, that not all paths are marked, and not all directions are forward, that sometimes the best way to move is to stop and feel, that some of the clearest truths are found in what cannot be seen. So the next time a fog drapes itself across the world, don't wait for it to lift. Step into it, let it wrap around you, let it blur the noise and sharpen the now, let it be a map, not to somewhere else but to this moment, this space, this breath, because the mist, in all its quiet, carries more than moisture. It carries a way of being. Thunder is not only the voice of storms, it is the memory of mountains. It rolls across valleys and ridges like a slow echo, like something ancient remembering its shape. Even when the peaks have worn down, even when time has softened their jagged crowns into rounded hills, thunder still knows where they once stood. It moves differently in these places, more resonant, more layered. It lingers not because it must, but because the land still invites it to stay. You can feel this when you listen closely, not just to the sound itself, but to the way it moves. Thunder does not pass in a straight line. It wraps around slopes, bounces off cliffs, gets caught in canyons. It becomes more than noise, it becomes place, and the place in turn becomes part of the sound. When lightning splits the sky, thunder follows, a low, expanding boom that grows out of the heat. The sudden violence of air pushed apart faster than sound can flee. But where that sound travels, how it moves, and how long it remains, that is shaped entirely by the land beneath. Flatlands let it glide, forests muffle it. But old mountain ranges, even those eroded with age, hold it close, let it roll, let it unfold. This is why some places seem to hold thunder longer than others, why the sound arrives not in one burst but in waves, why it seems to circle, to rise again even after it has passed, because in these places the terrain remembers height, it remembers verticality, it remembers being a home for storms. There are mountain ranges that once stood taller than any that exist today, long before humans, before birdsong, before even the trees. The Appalachians, now soft and worn, were once as towering as the Himalayas, but time, through wind, through water, through the quiet insistence of change, has worn them down. Still the ground remembers. The shape is different, but the soul remains, and so thunder, when it arrives, honours what once was. Even in places where mountains have crumbled into nothing more than highlands or rolling hills, the rock beneath still speaks. Subsurface layers, once lifted by tectonic might, still guide how sound moves through the ground. Seismic waves and acoustic reverberations follow these hidden contours. The thunder hears them and responds. On stormy days when clouds gather low and heavy, and the sky hums with charged silence, the land leans in. The air thickens, lightning carves its brief and blinding path, and then the thunder. First a crack, then a roll, then a long, stretching sound that seems to take its time. In valleys shaped by forgotten peaks, that sound does not hurry. It resonates. It sits inside the hollows like breath inside a chest. Children often count the seconds between lightning and thunder, trying to measure the storm's distance. But what they are really feeling is time passing through space, the space shaped by the land beneath. In deep valleys, the gap is filled with echoes. On ridges, the sound arrives cleaner, sharper. Every contour, every angle reshapes the sound. Thunder is not just sound, it's a kind of storytelling. It tells of how far the storm has travelled. It tells of how warm the air is, how heavy the clouds, and it tells too of what the land beneath it remembers. Some places pull thunder inward, others let it pass, but in all there is dialogue, between sky and soil, between pressure and stone. In some traditions, thunder is more than weather. It is a spirit, a presence, a guardian. It cleanses, it warns, it speaks truths too big for words. Some cultures believe that thunder lives in the bones of the earth, that it rises when the world must be reminded of its own breath. In these stories, mountains are not just land, they are beings, and thunder is their voice even after they've fallen silent. Science agrees in its own way. Acoustic researchers study how thunder travels, how terrain shapes its path. They model its reflections, its delays, its depth. What they find again and again is that the land listens, that hills and cliffs and ancient rock layers amplify and hold the sound longer than we expect, that old landscapes, especially those once lifted high, are better at cradling the voice of storms. And maybe this is why, even in places where no mountains stand now, the thunder feels different, heavier, closer, as though it's speaking to something buried, as though it remembers, because land is never just surface. Beneath every field and forest and road lies the history of elevation, of uplift and erosion, of fire and pressure, of a deep time folding and unfolding. The rocks know, the soul knows, and thunder in its rolling reaches down and touches that knowing. You don't need to see the peaks to feel them. You only need to listen. Let's drift deeper now into the layers of sound and stone, where thunder becomes more than just noise. It becomes memory echoing across time. You can almost feel it moving, slow and deliberate, tracing invisible paths left behind by mountains long vanished. For thunder does not only speak in the present, it remembers what stood before. It slides along the ancient bones of the earth, curling through canyons, caught in the echoes of what once reached high into the clouds. When the sky bursts with lightning and the air tears apart, thunder is born in the sudden bloom of pressure. But how that thunder behaves, how it travels and settles, is shaped not only by the atmosphere, but by the landscape below. The terrain is the theatre, and the thunder is the actor, improvising with each ridge, each slope, each hollowed pass. And in places where great peaks once rose, it moves more slowly, more deeply, as if paying respect to what came before. Sound, like water, flows. It pours downhill, spills through valleys, pools in basins. It rebounds off stone, stretches over plains, folds into forests. In mountainous regions, past and present, it follows the contour of the land with the patience of wind. This is why when thunder rumbles across certain hills, it seems to last longer, to hang in the air like a bell still trembling after being struck. There are plateaus that were once highlands, highlands that were once mountain chains. The peaks have crumbled, eroded by wind, smoothed by glaciers, worn by rain that fell for centuries without pause. But erosion does not erase, it only transforms. The hidden structure remains. Beneath layers of soil, the rock still holds its form. Thunder, ever sensitive, still recognizes the shapes and sings accordingly. In these places, even the animals seem to notice. Deer lift their heads before the first roll has faded. Birds fall quiet. Frogs pause. The forest holds its breath. Not in fear, but in recognition. The sound is familiar, not just loud but rooted. It feels like a presence, like something that belongs. There are moments when thunder seems to move in slow waves, echoing off the walls of a valley, returning again and again until it becomes hard to tell where it began. These reverberations are not tricks of sound, they are conversations with the land. They are thunder passing through ancient corridors of stone, guided not by the straightness of air, but by the curves of terrain. You can stand on a hillside and feel the sound wrap around you, like a coat, like a memory you didn't know you had. Even the trees respond. In forests where the ground swells gently upward, where long ago tectonic lifting still shapes the slope, the canopy shifts subtly during storms. Branches quiver, leaves tilt. Rain follows the thunder, but the thunder arrives first, pressing through the trunks like a message passed hand to hand. Some rocks amplify sound. Granite, dense and unyielding, throws it back sharply. Limestone, porous and layered, softens it, lets it linger. In regions once dominated by volcanic activity, where basalt lines the cliffs and echoes bounce without end, thunder seems to hum with a deep resonance, as if the earth is answering itself. These geologic differences shape how thunder moves, whether it crackles like glass or rolls like distant drums, in caves hidden beneath old mountains, where air is still and damp and darkness has shaped every surface. Thunder is felt more than heard. It enters the rock like breath, shakes the silence loose, and then slips away. Explorers deep underground have reported moments when a distant storm could be sensed, through faint vibration, a soft pulse that travels through layers of stone like a slow heartbeat. Even there, beneath the skin of the world, thunder finds its way. On open plains where peaks once slept, thunder moves wide and low. It may seem slower, stretched thin across distance, but if you listen closely you can hear its weight, the way it carries something beyond the storm. It is not just air collapsing, it is the memory of pressure, of elevation, of height no longer seen but still felt. And when storms pass over these ancient lands, their voices are often different. They seem older, more deliberate, less like an interruption, and more like a return. The land does not resist the thunder, it welcomes it, like a host opening a door to an old friend. And the thunder lingers, not to frighten, but to honour. Scientists measuring infrasound, the low-frequency sound waves that thunder often produces, have found that these waves can travel vast distances, sometimes circling the globe. They move beneath the threshold of hearing, but they are still there, pulsing quietly through the planet's air and stone. These sounds carry messages about storms, about eruptions, about changes in atmosphere. But perhaps they carry something more. Perhaps they carry the shape of the land as well, the echoes of what has been. Thunder over mountains is a layered thing, first the flash of light, then the pause, then the sound, growing, expanding, rolling down the ridges, slipping through the passes. It does not arrive all at once. It arrives in pieces, in echoes, in reminders, and the further it travels, the more it gathers, like a river collecting tributaries. There are stories told by people who live near long-forgotten ranges, stories of storms that sound different when they move through certain valleys, as if the sky recognizes the place, as if the air thickens not just with moisture, but with meaning. These stories are often passed quietly, without need for proof, because those who've lived long with the land know thunder does not lie. It follows the truth of terrain, no matter how hidden. So the next time you hear thunder roll across the land, listen not just to the sound, but to its movement, where it begins, how it shifts, where it pauses, where it deepens. There is a story there, not only of sky and storm, but of land and time, of peaks that stood where now there are only hills, of valleys shaped by pressure long ago, because thunder does not forget where mountains once rose, it returns to them. Now the storm begins to move on, its clouds stretching eastward, its rain softening, its light growing dim and golden in the distance. But the thunder remains. It rumbles one last time, as if reluctant to leave, as if some part of it belongs to this place. And perhaps it does. Perhaps in every storm there is a piece that waits, a part that settles into the earth, that becomes part of the echo, part of the breath of stone. After the rain, the air is rich, not just with moisture, but with meaning. The leaves are dripping, the soil darkened, the hillsides fresh with the hush that only follows thunder. This is the moment when everything feels full, when the storm has said what it needed to say and the land has heard every word. And beneath your feet, deep in the roots of what was once a mountain, the rock still hums with memory. You can almost feel it, not as sound, but as presence, a weight in the air, a slow pulse in the ground. The storm has passed, but its imprint remains. And not just in puddles or windblown branches, but in the resonance that lingers. That's what thunder does. It imprints. It engraves its voice into the shape of the world, especially where peaks once slept. Some places seem to hold that voice longer than others. Long after the sky has cleared, the memory remains, in the shape of valleys, in the bend of rivers, in the soft ridges that curve like sleeping giants. The land doesn't just reflect thunder, it invites it, carves paths for it, catches it like a bowl catches rain, and the thunder in return recognizes these shapes, these gestures of stone and time. The people who live in these lands feel it too. They speak of certain hills where thunder always seems louder, of ridges where storms come often, even when nearby valleys stay dry. They speak of sounds that roll longer, that echo twice, that make the air feel thick for hours. These are not myths, these are observations, truths told in experience. Because the landscape, even without its former height, still calls the storm. Even in silence, the earth tells the story of its past. Rock layers folded by pressure, old seabeds lifted into dry air, valleys shaped by rivers that vanished 1,000,000 years ago. These are not just features, they are memories written in stone, and thunder, that ancient voice of sky and pressure, reads those memories out loud. Every rumble is a recitation, every echo a reflection. And perhaps that is why thunder affects us so deeply. It is not only noise, not only warning, it's recognition. It reminds us that we live on a planet shaped by forces too vast to see in a single lifetime, that we are walking across bones that once stood tall, that time has softened peaks into hills, but has not erased them. In this way, thunder becomes a bridge between sky and earth, between past and present. It is one of the few voices that speaks in all directions at once, upward to the clouds that birthed it, outward across the landscape it travels, downward into the stone that still listens, and inward to us. We feel it in our chests, in our bones, in the stillness that follows, and though we may not always know why, we pause, we listen. Something inside us recognizes the sound, something older than words. Perhaps it is because we too carry the memory of mountains, in our language, in our myths, in the way we look to the horizon and see more than just shape. Children mimic the sound of thunder with their voices, with drums, with stomping feet. Not to frighten, but to remember, to echo, to belong to something bigger than themselves. Poets write of it, musicians chase its rhythm. Even our hearts beating steady know the feeling of that roll, the gathering, the release, the quiet after. And in every part of the world there are names for thunder, words rooted in rhythm, in rumble, in reverence. Some call it the drumming of gods, others say it is the mountain speaking, still others believe it is the sky weeping for what has passed. No matter the story, the truth remains. Thunder connects. So when the next storm rises, and the sky splits open with light, and the thunder rolls across your skin like distant footsteps, remember this. You are not just hearing sound, you are hearing the world remember itself. You are hearing the shape of the land even when it lies hidden. You are hearing the echo of peaks that once stood where you now stand. And when that thunder finally fades, and the world grows still again, something stays behind. Not just moisture in the air, or the scent of rain on stone, but the knowing, the quiet knowing that something old has passed through, that something ancient has spoken, that something vast has seen you and remembered your place in the great shape of things. Because even when the mountain is gone, the thunder still knows where it was, and it will always return to speak its name.